the 27th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. Matthew 27 is a pivotal chapter in the Gospel of Matthew, one of the four Gospels in the New Testament of the Bible. This chapter recounts the bitter love events surrounding the trial and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It is a story of betrayal, injustice, suffering, and ultimately, hope. In a short note, Jesus gave his life for you and I. Matthew, the author, presents these events in a way that highlights their theological significance for his readers. Please endeavor to read this chapter yourself. You will see what Jesus went through for us. He wants us to understand what happened and why it mattered to us as children of God. Matthew 27 follows directly from the previous chapter where Jesus shares the Last Supper with his disciples. He predicts his betrayal and Peter's denial of him. Our dear Peter did not see this coming. The chapter ends with Jesus' arrest in Gethsemane. Just imagine praying all night, tired and probably exhausted, and being whisked away by these wicked soldiers. This sets the stage for the tumultuous events that unfold in this chapter, culminating in Jesus' crucifixion. The events of this chapter are central to the Christian faith. They mark a turning point in the story of Jesus, from his public ministry to his death and resurrection. Understanding Matthew 27 is crucial for grasping the significance of Jesus' sacrifice and the message of the Christian gospel. The narrative of this chapter is filled with emotional intensity and theological depth. It challenges readers to confront the reality of human sin and the depth of God's love. Through the trial and crucifixion of Jesus, Matthew presents a powerful picture of God's plan of salvation for humanity. Betrayal and despair, the disciples' reaction. Just imagine your favorite person, in the name of Jesus. Our master Matthew 27 begins with the aftermath of Jesus' arrest. Judas Iscariot, the disciple who betrayed Jesus, is immediately overcome with remorse. It's just too late to cry when the head is off. What a wicked, evil kiss. He tries to return the 30 pieces of silver he received for his treachery. He confesses his sin to the chief priests and elders, saying, "I have sinned in that I have betrayed the innocent blood." Overcome by guilt and despair, Judas throws the money into the temple. He then goes out and hangs himself. Remember, viewers, do not fall for that sin. Once the devil is done with you, he dumps you like a used trash bag, or even yet, like a trash. No gain. The Jewish leaders, however, are indifferent to Judas's fate. They use the money to buy a potter's field, which becomes known as the Field of Blood. This act fulfills an Old Testament prophecy. The disciples are scattered. They are fearful of suffering the same fate as their leader. Their fear is a stark contrast to the courage and conviction Jesus displayed throughout his ministry. It highlights the human frailty of the disciples and their struggle to comprehend the events unfolding before them. This section of Matthew 27 sets a somber tone for the chapter. It demonstrates the devastating consequences of betrayal. Judas's actions highlight the gravity of sin and its power to corrupt even those closest to Jesus. Sin destroys. The disciples' fear underscores the human response to suffering and the challenge of remaining faithful in the face of adversity. Before the Romans, Jesus faces the Sanhedrin. Following his arrest in Gethsemane, Jesus is taken to Caiaphas, the high priest, for a hasty trial before the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the highest Jewish council composed of elders, scribes, and Pharisees. They held considerable religious and judicial authority among the Jewish people. Jesus' trial before the Sanhedrin is marked by false accusations and a lack of due process. The religious leaders are determined to find him guilty of blasphemy. They believe he claimed to be the Son of God, a claim they considered heretical. Despite being unjustly accused, Jesus remains calm and dignified. He refuses to defend himself against the false charges. His silence speaks volumes about the injustice of the trial and the hypocrisy of his accusers. The Sanhedrin ultimately condemns Jesus to death for blasphemy. However, they lack the authority to carry out the death penalty under Roman rule. They decide to hand Jesus over to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, hoping he will endorse their verdict. Pilate's quandary, a judge facing political pressure. Jesus is brought before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. Pilate is depicted as a complex and somewhat ambivalent figure. He is skeptical of the charges brought against Jesus by the Jewish leaders. He even acknowledges, "I find no fault in him." However, Pilate is also a shrewd politician. He is aware of the potential for unrest among the Jewish population if he does not appease their leaders. He faces a difficult dilemma: condemn an innocent man to death or risk a riot that could jeopardize his own position. Pilate attempts to distance himself from the situation. He tries to pass Jesus off to Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, but Herod sends him back. Feeling trapped, Pilate offers the crowd a choice release: Jesus or Barabbas, a notorious criminal. This section highlights the political intrigue surrounding Jesus' trial. It demonstrates how religious and political motivations intertwined to seal Jesus' fate. Pilate's struggle reflects the tension between justice and expediency, conscience and political survival. Section 5. The crowd's choice: Barabbas over Jesus. In a dramatic turn of events, the crowd, swayed by the chief priests and elders, chooses to release Barabbas, a convicted murderer and insurrectionist, instead of Jesus. They even demand Jesus' crucifixion, shouting, "His blood be on us and on our children." This choice reveals the depth of the crowd's rejection of Jesus. It also demonstrates the power of mob mentality and the influence of religious leaders who have poisoned the people against Jesus. Pilate, reluctant to condemn Jesus but unwilling to risk a riot, accedes to the crowd's demands. He washes his hands, symbolically declaring his innocence in the matter, and hands Jesus over to be crucified. This act of condemnation seals Jesus' fate. It highlights the injustice of his trial and the role of human choice in his death. The crowd's cry for Jesus' blood also foreshadows the profound consequences of their decision, both for themselves and future generations. Section 6. Condemnation and Crucifixion. The sentence is carried out. Following his condemnation, Jesus endures horrific physical and emotional abuse at the hands of the Roman soldiers. They mock him, dress him in a scarlet robe and a crown of thorns, and beat him mercilessly. They nail him to a wooden cross, a common form of execution in the Roman Empire. Crucifixion was a brutal and humiliating death reserved for the worst criminals and enemies of the state. The inscription, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," is placed above him. Despite the excruciating pain and humiliation, Jesus remains remarkably composed. He prays for his executioners, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This act of forgiveness, in the face of unimaginable suffering, demonstrates the depth of Jesus' love and compassion, even for those who have wronged him. Section 7. Death on the cross, the mocking and the miracles. As Jesus hangs on the cross, he is mocked by the crowds and the religious leaders. They taunt him, challenging him to come down from the cross if he truly is the Son of God. Even one of the criminals crucified alongside him joins in the mockery. However, amidst the darkness and despair, there are also moments of profound faith and recognition. One of the criminals repents of his sins and asks Jesus to remember him when he comes into his kingdom. Jesus responds with words of extraordinary grace and assurance, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." At the moment of Jesus' death, the curtain in the temple which separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple is torn in two from top to bottom. This symbolizes the breaking down of the barrier between God and humanity through Jesus' sacrifice. Section 8. Burial and guarding the tomb, the end of the beginning. After Jesus breathes his last, Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy disciple, requests permission from Pilate to bury Jesus' body. Pilate grants his request. Joseph, along with Nicodemus, another secret follower of Jesus, wraps Jesus' body in linen cloths and lays it in a new tomb. This act of burial was an act of great courage and compassion. It demonstrated their devotion to Jesus, even in death. The tomb, a symbol of death and finality, becomes the unlikely setting for the miracle that is to follow. Concerned that Jesus' disciples might try to steal the body and claim he had risen from the dead, the chief priests and Pharisees ask Pilate to post a guard at the tomb. Pilate agrees, and the tomb is sealed with a large stone. This section marks a pivotal transition in the narrative. It seems to signal the tragic end of Jesus' story. However, the sealing of the tomb and the posting of the guard unknowingly set the stage for the climactic event of the Christian faith, the resurrection. Section 9, Resurrection and Hope, a new chapter begins. Mathew 27 ends without explicitly describing the resurrection. However, the stage is set for the glorious event that will be revealed in the next chapter. The sealed tomb, the guards, and the despair of the disciples all serve to heighten the anticipation for the resurrection morning. The resurrection of Jesus is the cornerstone of the Christian faith. It transforms the crucifixion from a story of defeat and despair into a message of hope, victory, and new life. It is through the resurrection that the true significance of Jesus' sacrifice is fully revealed. The love that knows no bound. Selfless love. Matthew 27 therefore must be understood in light of the resurrection. It is not just a tragic story of an innocent man unjustly condemned. The love of God for the whole world, for the human race. It is the prelude to the greatest miracle of all time. A miracle that changes everything. Thanks for listening and watching. I hope you read the Bible chapter as well. If not, you can read it later. Stay blessed, and Jesus, who died for you and me, loves us dearly. Please subscribe, like, and share the gospel of the good news. Shalom.